This is our first meeting of what we've called the AI Academy in the School of Engineering. And this is the result of having conversations with Jason Sarah, the interim dean of the school, about the need for having some base level of fluency with what's happening in AI for the purposes of thinking creatively, how it might affect our courses, our teacher, or even our research or our everyday work as faculty members. The core is to discover how AI tools can help us be more innovative in our own everyday. And so for that reason, I wanted today's session to focus on thinking beyond just AI tools. And so what I wanted to talk about is using various tools, chaining tools in a way that creates a workflow that kind of opens up possibilities for what you can do. So let me start by sharing my screen and showing you an example that I created for you today. Let me start with the Perplexity interface. So I started on Perplexity. The difference with Perplexity and most of the other AI tools that are popular, like ChatGPT, is that Perplexity is an AI first search engine. So it always goes to the internet and does search. So I put in, to start this workflow example, just this very simple prompt. Find out everything you can about the George Washington University School of Engineering and Applied Science with a target audience of potential students and parents. Very simple prompt in Perplexity. Now, while it was working, I could see here its work being displayed to me as what we call the AI agent was going out to the internet, grabbing web pages and analyzing these web pages to create this result for me. I could see it doing this, right? It was giving me a little bit of a trace of its work. And it compiled a set of pages with this prompt that I gave it. As you can see here, 20 different pages it found independently, completely autonomously. Then it explored financial aid rankings and facilities. It decided to explore those things. Then it reviewed all of these sources right here. And then it found, so all of those sources it reviewed autonomously. As you can see, I'm scrolling down through the trace of the agent as it prowled the internet, and you can see it found comments on Reddit, it found pages on the Hatchet, pages on various websites of GW. All of these were autonomously read until it finished its research. It took about less than 10 minutes, I would say. And so then it created this report for me based on these sources. So the particular thing about Perplexity is it is not relying on the training of the LLM. It is going out to the internet and reading the pages and doing retrieval and then doing language processing of all of those things. This is the report it generated. What I did is I went to the bottom of this report. I'm scrolling all the way down to the report it created, and you don't need to worry about that now. I can share it with you later. And then I went down here and I just copied here the whole contents of the report. You see, I'm highlighting the copy button on the bottom. I copied all of these contents and I just copied them over to a clean markdown file that I saved. I haven't moved the file in here, but I will move it in here so that you have it. It was a markdown file. I simply copied and pasted all of those results to a markdown file. Then I went to NotebookLM and I uploaded, this is NotebookLM, and I put it into VS Code, which is a editor. And so when I did that, I had, this is the raw content that I pasted in here. Right here on the left is the raw content that I pasted. When I copied from Perplexity with just that one button, it already saved into the clipboard the markdown source file. So I pasted it into this on the left. And note that at the bottom, it gave me the raw list of URLs that it was using and citing in its report. I like the fact that this is a clean text-only document that I can paste into any markdown editor or even a markdown. There's some online markdown editors as well. I'm going to go back to the place where I did the search, okay, and show you that here, you know, if you were not, let me actually collapse the steps. Here is the result, right? Here is what Perplexity gave me as its report on the basis of this very simple prompt. So I could have done a more dedicated prompt to focus on biomedical engineering. And I encourage you to do that. If you want to experiment with the kind of workflow that I want to show today, maybe you could do that yourself on Perplexity with a more detailed prompt that will guide the agent towards the resources that you prefer. But if we look at biomedical engineering, and perhaps this description of biomedical engineering is not sufficient, you will see that there is a link. So the key here is that this interface will always cite some source, and it remains for us as users to go back to the source. I can click on this link, open in a new tab, and review the source. So this is the source that it is using right now. Perhaps this source is out of date. Perhaps this source was published 5 years ago and some information from it is no longer valid. It is up to us to follow the links to these every paragraph, or sometimes even a sentence, will have a link to where it is taking that material. This is the way Perplexity works, and many other agents that do what's called deep research will do the same thing. They will give you a link and you have an active link from the interface to follow. There's nothing that will save you from the hard work of verifying the sources that the agent used for its report. This is what's called, a lot of people call it the verification gap, meaning that when we use these kinds of tools, they're very fast and very high performing in terms of curating sources and giving us a report. And we can very quickly generate a report that could be 25, 30, 40 pages. And then we are left with this verification gap, meaning we have to do the hard work of verifying that the sources that it used are the ones that we want, and correcting the record for whatever is not to our liking. So let me leave it there for now, because I want to complete this workflow example and come back to it with the concept of grounding, okay, which is one of the topics I wanted to focus on today. I have NotebookLM, which is another AI application that on the poll, the majority had not used, only a couple of you had used it. So I'm showing you here on the left where it says GWCs via perplexity.md. That is the markdown file, literal markdown file from copy paste on Perplexity that I just dumped in here. On this NotebookLM, the interface has sources on the left. I click on add sources, and here you can add any source of files. I just clicked on choose file, or drag and drop the file into this middle section, or you can add files from Google Drive, as you can see on the left, or you can add files via link, website, or YouTube videos, in which case it will do a full transcript of the video. It doesn't use the images, it uses the transcript, or you can copy text directly here into a text window. So you can add your sources here. Now, I added the markdown file from the Perplexity search. I added just literally the GW logo, and I selected one page from the GW branding guide that only had the color palette. So the color palette of the colors of GW, because I thought maybe I could use that to guide the graphics. Then I used the slide deck button to generate automatically a slide deck. And here is the slide deck. I want to show it to you. Just on the basis of that automatically generated report. And my prompt here was create a slide deck for admissions professionals. It just occurred to me to do that, on the fly yesterday. Visiting high schools and promoting GWCs to potential students and parents. Use an elegant style and adopt this color scheme of the university provided in the file gwcolorpalette.pdf. You should also use the logo provided in the file gwc's logo.jpg on the title slide and the closing slide. That was my full prompt, and it generated these slides right here. I'm going to flip through them. As you can see, the logo is right there on the front slide, and here, Epicenter Engine Ecosystem, it came up with that. As you can see, the colors pretty much look like GW colors. It went out to the internet and it found those images. Those are not images that I gave it or anything. It found that map. It created this slide with data that we don't know if they're completely correct. We would have to double check from the sources and internship hosts and all of that. Science and Engineering Hall. There we go. Nanofabrication. I'm just flipping through these. Popular options, concentrations from the classroom to the marketplace, 96% of success rate, financial aid, engineer the future, start at the epicenter. Contact us. I actually checked, and that short URL, go.gwu.edu/GW visit, is a correct short URL that does resolve to a visit page of GW. This was generated based on these sources that I added on the left automatically. Once you generate these slides, which I found pretty impressive, in fact, you can only download, as you can see here, the download button. This will download a PDF. So I have on our shared drive here added the PDF. So you can see it says Epicenter of Opportunity. This is our shared Google Drive folder. And here are the slides for you to have a look at. It's a PDF. So it's not editable for the time being. But I read in the information from the NotebookLM team that they are planning to have the ability to export to Google Slides. But for the time being, what I can do is go to Google Gemini, upload that PDF that was downloaded from NotebookLM, and create a Google Slides presentation using the PDF attached. It worked for a few minutes, and it said slow thinking. It generated, here's the trace of the agent of what it did. Okay. I could read that. It's always very educational to read the trace of the agent, I find. It's very interesting, identifying visual assets. I've just focused on identifying the visual assets. Is the agent thinking to itself what it's going to do? And on the basis of the document, just a single PDF, it generated these slides. And here they are. Now different figures. These now I can actually, from these slides, see that button here? Export to slides. So now I can export this new version of a presentation based on that research that was done by Perplexity. Now I have editable, because I already exported it, now I have editable Google Slides. Okay, these Google Slides, actually now I can go back to NotebookLM and add the Google Slides to NotebookLM, and they become another source for the notebook, which I could potentially use to create the graphics maybe when I ask for a video overview. Let's create a video overview right now, and it's going to take a few minutes. You can see it's working right now. So this might take, 5, 7 minutes, 10 minutes, and let's see what it does. I didn't give it any custom instructions, but if you click on that little pen icon, I would be able to choose some styles and give specific instructions on what I want, but I didn't give it any custom instructions. I'm just doing the default right now to see what it does. So here we have an example of what I want to call a workflow, because we started with Perplexity with a short prompt. In this case, you can be more specific. We copied the output and pasted it onto a new Markdown document, uploaded that document to NotebookLM, added an image of the logo and branding information, asked it to create a set of slides, which I found them pretty incredible. I downloaded that as a PDF. It could potentially be used as is. And this PDF, of course, is not editable for the time being. That's the current feature of NotebookLM, but soon enough you will have editable Google Slides. But they are actually incredible good quality slides. And in a pinch, you might use them as is, or then move to another application where you can get an editable version. And putting that back into NotebookLM and using those slides here as a source kind of closes the circle of this example workflow. Now, yes, my original sources on Perplexity needed verification because it's just grabbing things from the internet. But once I put sources inside NotebookLM, this particular application is what we call grounded, meaning anything that is asked in this chat that occurs in the middle is grounded on the document. So I can start typing here what percentage, what are examples of companies where GW sees students find internships. This now is going to be grounded. The answer here is going to be grounded on the documents that I provided. If instead of using the result of a Perplexity search, I had used my own documents that are already confirmed to be correct, then the results here of any question would be grounded on those verifiable, correct sources. I think that the lesson here is I just created one example. There are infinite combinations, and we as users, as we start experimenting, can settle on one or the other. The goalposts are moving with these tools becoming better every day, and one day one is better than the other. The features are always changing. So really, I think there's a mindset change. What I wanted to focus on is this mindset change between focusing on individual tools to thinking about integrated workflows where we are orchestrating different AI model surfaces, meaning one same model can be approached via web interface, via API, which we haven't even touched, via, for example, Google. We can go to gemini.google.com, or we can go to AI Studio. I mean, there's different surfaces for the same model. And then there are different applied tools that generate assets. So I was writing some of these things down. Here I wrote for today an example of this NotebookLM Perplexity workflow recipe. So this is what I wanted to suggest, is that perhaps some of you can follow this recipe and experiment yourselves. But once you start doing that, maybe you come up with an alternative. Maybe you want to use Gemini instead of NotebookLM. Maybe you want to use ChatGPT projects. Maybe you want to use Claude projects. There are different ways of achieving these results. And the curious mindset that we should have is one of connecting these different things and trying them out. This is the third tab in this document, just explains this example that I just showed you. Here are the prompts that I used in each case, and links to the resulting slides in PDF and the resulting presentation that Gemini created. We could add here more tabs with our own examples. That would be really fun to do. If you come up with a different one, to just add a tab here and put your own example of a workflow that kind of goes from this idea of a workflow. I put at the front is that you can go from, for example, the research and analysis part, for which you can use Perplexity, like I showed, or you can use Gemini Deep Research, or you can use ChatGPT Deep Research, or Claude Deep Research. So this research portion can go through various tools. Then you might go through turning that research into something usable, and there are many tools for that, and then creating assets for perhaps presentations or graphics or infographics or videos or various other things. So infinite possibilities. Okay, here we have the video it generated, Engineering at the Epicenter.
We'll see what that actually means
Yeah.
for the students who go there. So this is really the central question, isn't it? Think about it. If you're looking at engineering schools, they all start to sound the same after a while. Top professors, great labs, you know the drill. So what's the real difference maker? What's the thing that gives students a genuine edge? GW has a very specific answer to that.
And here's their answer, which is actually super clear. They've built their whole identity around these three ideas: the epicenter, the engine, and the ecosystem. Think of it as the 3 E's. This is basically the blueprint for how they're different, and it's how we're going to walk through this. So let's start with that first one, the epicenter.
First up, the
I have a
epicenter.
feeling-
Shouldn't be confined to a classroom or a
I have a feeling that it used the images from the presentation. You notice that? From the Google slide, that image is this image. You notice? So it is using the Google Slides in its video overview. Now, before I did this one, I was working on this other one. And for this one, what I did was the following. As I was saying earlier on, with Jason Zara, we were connecting the idea of developing AI capabilities and fluency amongst us, connecting that with the priority of Cs to develop an entrepreneurial mindset. So I thought, okay, so let's use the entrepreneurial mindset and figure out what this is, and use NotebookLM to help us wrap our heads around it for a little bit. So what I did is I went to the Kern Network website and found a micro course there. They have a platform called Engineering Unleashed, This platform had a course called An Introduction to Entrepreneurial Mindset and the 3 Cs. And so I copied over some of the content to a Google Doc. So once I copied it to a Google Doc, this is the Google Doc right here on the left, I added that source from my Google Drive using here at the bottom left that button to add from my Google Drive that document. Then I found a few videos on YouTube. So here's a video from Kern about their entrepreneurial mindset framework. So I added these 3 videos that I found that explain some of the concepts that they talk about as sources in NotebookLM. And then I auto-generated an infographic with just a single button. I didn't give it any custom instructions from those 4 sources, and it generated this, an image of what it read about this idea of the entrepreneurial mindset with these 3 pillars of curiosity, connections, and creating value. It explains here a way of thinking that shapes a unique approach to problem solving and innovation. Curiosity is an information gap that fuels exploration. And so, yeah, you can actually use this infographic to help you think about this topic. For example, in this case, I was just myself getting informed about this. Then I did a new one where I gave it some instructions. Look at this one. In this case, my custom instructions, this is my prompts, were: make a graphic in the style of a professor's whiteboard. Diagrams, arrows, boxes, and captions, explaining the core ideas visually. Use colors well. That was the custom prompt, picked up from some discussions on Twitter about using whiteboard-inspired graphics. And as you can see, you have like a picture of a whiteboard with a little whiteboard felt pens at the bottom and some smudges on it. And it drew on top this infographic that I find actually quite appealing in terms of just extracting the core of what they call, what the Kern framework refers to as the entrepreneurial mindset, combining curiosity, connections, and creating value. And this infographic, I also then ask for a set of slides. The theme, interconnected world, technical excellence, the framework, curiosity is the engine. And of course, you can generate as many of these as you want. In this case, it was literally a single kind of NotebookLM style approach to the task. I did this first before the one that I showed you on GW. And this is a simple one where I just added sources and took advantage of these new formats of output from NotebookLM. And I wanted to show you these because NotebookLM created these new forms of outputs, infographic, and slide deck very recently. It has also the quiz and flashcards which the students can use for their own studies. And in the reports section, you can generate a number of different kinds of reports like briefing docs, agenda, workshop agenda, study guide, blog post, and so on. And you can play around with the custom instructions for each one of these, where you can give more direction to what you might want. In this case, for example, for these slides, I gave these instructions: create a deck for presentations to a group of engineering faculty using a professional, minimalistic style and best practices like those by Gar Reynolds in Presentation Zen, and use a whiteboard style. So that was my custom instruction for the slides that you were just seeing. What I wanted to really invite you to try the combination of NotebookLM with Perplexity, and remind you that the key is that whatever source you add to NotebookLM is going to be the only source of truth for any answers that are provided to you in the chat interface. And any of the other outputs are going to be grounded on those sources. So if you have taken care of curating the sources, you know that the output is going to be true to them and there won't be any hallucinations. That is the key. All right, so let me show you one more. This was one that I was making for myself. I gave a talk recently about my experiences with AI in the classroom in the last year or so. So I put the talk that just came out on YouTube recently, I put it here on the sources on the left as a YouTube source. And I had a couple other talks that were related. Now here you can unselect all your sources. You see, I clicked on the box and then you can select individually. So what I did is I selected this one, this recent talk, and this one. I selected 2 of them. You can combine, however, you can have up to 50, I think, or maybe more. It depends on the subscription that you have. You can have, suppose, up to 50 here on the left. And so then you can selectively choose to consider some or not, and not others, for creating these artifacts. So it created this infographic for me on the base of those two. I'll let you watch it for a little bit. Then it created these slides. Some of it is a little bit too wordy. I might not choose to make slides that are so wordy. And here it failed to do a proper layout a little bit in the left. It created its own images, and it shows some pretty good items to highlight from the material. Again, these slides can be downloaded as PDF, and potentially one could use some of the images. You could just start with that and decide to do your own set of slides and only use some images that it created and get, just inspiration. And since it can be downloaded as PDF, you can copy some text, and maybe you want to do a manual version of it. And in various cases, I worked with this in very different days. I worked with this notebook where I asked some questions here on the chat. If you ask a question and you like the response and you want to save it, you can click to this button here that says Save to Note. And then that response will be saved here on the right as a note. And those notes then you might want to use for something. In this case, I had some specific questions and I saved them. They were, for some reason, valuable to me. And then you can also grab this and say convert to source. And if you convert to source, the content of that note will come back, will be copied over to the left, and then be a source that you can select to make a new infographic or a new slide deck. So with questions here in the middle, I can start extracting information from my sources, focusing in on specific items. And then if I like the answer, I can save it and reuse it in various ways. In the Google Drive, I have already started writing some materials to go along with what I present today. And I shared the slides, shared the source documents. So what I wanted to invite you is to just take that example and see if you, for some topic that you're interested in, you can use that workflow, collect some sources, generate some slides, generate an infographic, see if you like it, see if you can use some custom instructions to change how the output looks like, and experiment with that.